The laughter was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, a jagged, mocking roar that bounced off the mahogany walls of the dining room I had paid for. My son-in-law, Jason, stood at the head of my table, his wine glass raised like a scepter, his face twisted into a smirk of pure, fermented arrogance. "How does it feel being hated by everyone at this table, old man?" he'd shouted. And then, the sound that truly broke me, my daughter Stephanie didn't gasp. She didn't defend me. She threw her head back and laughed the loudest of them all. In that moment, the air in the room didn't just turn cold, it turned clinical. I felt the part of me that was a father and a grandfather simply switch off, replaced by the man who had crushed competitors for 40 years. I set my glass down, a soft, deliberate click against the wood, and looked Jason directly in the pupils. "How would you feel?" I asked, my voice as calm as a graveyard at midnight. "Waking up homeless tomorrow?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. I am Robert Coleman. I'm 68 years old, and for 4 decades I built an empire of grease and gears, turning one garage into a statewide chain. I sold it all in 2022, thinking I was buying peace. I thought I was buying a home for my daughter, her husband, and my grandkids. But standing there, watching the color drain from Jason's face while my daughter's smile curdled into fear, I realized I hadn't bought a home. I had funded a coup. "Dad, you're being dramatic," Stephanie finally stammered, her voice thin and defensive. I didn't answer. I just stood up, pushed my chair in with a slow, agonizing screech of wood on tile, and walked to my study. I could hear Jason trying to restart the party behind me, the desperate, high-pitched chuckle of a man who realized he'd just poked a sleeping grizzly with a toothpick, but the atmosphere was dead. I locked my study door and sat in the dark. My hands weren't shaking. In fact, they'd never been steadier. Running a business teaches you one thing: never react emotionally when you can react strategically. You see, Jason thought I was a dinosaur, a relic of 1975 who didn't understand modern life. What he failed to realize is that the laws of leverage haven't changed since the Bronze Age. I opened the hidden safe behind the third shelf of my library. Out came the manila folder, property deeds, living trust documents, bank statements, and the preliminary report from David Palmer, the private investigator I'd hired 3 months ago because I'd smelled a rat in my own kitchen. Does loyalty have a price, or is it just something people discard when the weather gets too comfortable? I intended to find out. I sent a single text to my attorney, Gerald Morgan. Time to move. Monday, 9 a.m. The next morning, the house felt like a crime scene. I found Jason in the kitchen, buttering toast with a performance of casualness that was almost pathetic. "Morning, Robert," he said, his voice forced. "Listen, about last night, too much wine. You know how it is. No hard feelings?" I poured my coffee, watching the steam rise, my eyes never leaving his. "Of course, Jason. Water under the bridge." He relaxed. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. He actually believed me. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the man, to think that 8 years of systemic disrespect could be erased with a piece of cold toast and a half-hearted apology. I watched Stephanie squeeze his hand, a look of immense relief on her face. She thought her difficult father had been tamed. "Great," Jason said, checking his $400 watch. "Big presentation today. See you tonight." I watched him walk out to the car I'd helped him finance, wearing the clothes I'd effectively paid for by providing him a rent-free life. I spent that weekend playing the role of the reasonable old man, but beneath the surface, I was a shark in the shallows. I watched them. I watched how Jason positioned himself for the neighbors to see his perfect life. I watched him ignore the kids to take work calls that involved an awful lot of laughing for a sales pitch. Most importantly, I listened. On Sunday night, I heard them in the hallway. "Jason, what if he was serious about the homeless thing?" Stephanie whispered. "Baby, please." Jason's voice was firm, condescending. "It's your house. The old man's just throwing a tantrum. He put it in your name for estate planning years ago, remember? He's a guest here. He won't do anything because he has nowhere else to go." I leaned back in my chair, steepled my fingers, and smiled. Assumptions are the mother of all disasters. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Gerald Morgan's office smelled of expensive leather and old money. Gerald looked at the files I'd brought him and whistled. He really asked you how it felt to be hated at your own table? Word for word, I said. Then let's show him how it feels to be evicted, Gerald replied. We mapped out the execution. It wasn't about a quick strike, it was about a total environmental collapse. Phase 1. The financial reality check. I had been covering $4,200 a month in household expenses, property taxes, insurance, utilities, the very food they ate. Jason made $78,000 a year, a decent salary, but one that was currently being eaten alive by 2 luxury car payments and a mountain of credit card debt he'd racked up trying to look like a high roller. Without my subsidy, they were underwater by over $1,000 a month. Phase 2. The legal clarification. The house. 2847 Oakwood Drive. Jason was convinced it was Stephanie's. He'd told his friends it was his, but the deed was held solely by the Robert Coleman Living Trust. Stephanie wasn't even a beneficiary. I'd seen to that in 2022 when I noticed Jason's ambition was mostly just a hunger for my assets. Phase 3. The intelligence reveal. I opened David Palmer's updated report. It was a masterpiece of surveillance. Amber Richards, 29 years old, Jason's colleague. They'd been having lunches that lasted 3 hours. And the kicker? Jason had opened a secret bank account, siphoning off $400 a month while Stephanie struggled to keep the kids' activities funded. He'd met with a divorce lawyer twice. He wasn't just disrespecting me. He was planning to gut my daughter, leave her with the kids, and take half of a house he didn't even own to start a new life with Amber. Robert, Gerald said, looking up from the report, this is more than a family spat. This is a predatory strike by your son-in-law. I know, I said. That's why I'm not just kicking him out. I'm going to dismantle him. I spent the next few days watching them with a new, terrifying clarity. I saw the way Jason looked at the walls, as if he were already calculating the commission on the sale. I saw the way Stephanie deferred to him, her spirit eroded by 1,000 old man jokes. I called the family meeting on a Sunday afternoon. No kids, just the 3 of us. We need to talk about the future, I began. Jason leaned back on my sofa, his feet on my coffee table. Here we go again. The retirement home talk? Not quite, I said, sliding a folder across the table. I'm restructuring my finances. As of January 1st, I will no longer be paying the property taxes, the insurance, or the utilities for this home. That total comes to $2,120 per month. Stephanie gasped. Dad, we can't afford that. You should be able to, I said, looking at Jason. After all, Jason is the provider. He tells everyone this is his house, so provide. This is my wife's house, Jason shouted, standing up. You can't charge us for a house she owns. I didn't blink. Verify the deed, Jason. It's in my name. Always has been. And since you're so fond of jokes, here's a funny one. If you want to stay, the rent is $3,200 a month, market rate. Or, I'll give you the family discount, $500, provided you learn to keep your mouth shut and show some respect. The room went white-hot. Jason was screaming. Stephanie was sobbing. But I remained a statue. You have until December 15th, I said. Decide if you're the man you pretend to be, or if you're just a parasite who's run out of blood. I walked out, but I knew what was coming. Jason would panic. He would go to his lawyer, Richard Chen, and he would receive the shock of his life. 2 days later, the second hammer fell. I had lunch with Brian Thompson, the man who'd bought my business. Brian was a titan, and he owned 40% of TechFlow Solutions, the company where Jason worked. How's that son-in-law of yours? Brian asked over steak. He's ambitious, I said, sliding a copy of the private investigator's report across the table. So ambitious he's planning to divorce my daughter, hide assets, and conduct an affair with a subordinate while living off my dime. I thought you'd want to know the character of the man representing your company. Brian read the report. His face went hard. I don't like liabilities, Robert, and a man who cheats his family will eventually cheat his firm. When I got home, the air was thick with the scent of a dying marriage. Jason was in the kitchen, his face the color of ash. He'd been to the courthouse. He knew the house wasn't his. He knew he had no leverage. "We'll pay the $1,500, he whispered, not looking at me. "Good," I said. "But we have one more thing to discuss." I opened my briefcase and laid the photos of Amber Richards on the kitchen island. I laid out the secret bank statements. I laid out the logs from the divorce attorney. Stephanie walked in just as I placed the final photo down, Jason and Amber, looking very uncolleague-like at a bar downtown. The scream that came out of my daughter was the most painful thing I've ever heard. It wasn't a cry. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. "Jason," she whispered, clutching the counter. "It's not what it looks like," he started, the classic, pathetic refrain of a caught man. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "He thought he was going to divorce you and take half of this house to fund his new life. He was waiting for me to die or move out. He didn't realize that I've been 3 steps ahead of him since the day he called me a dinosaur." "Get out," Stephanie said. "Stephanie, honey! Get out!" she shrieked. Jason looked at me, his eyes full of a murderous, impotent rage. "You destroyed everything," he hissed. "No," I said. "I just stopped paying for your illusions. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, Jason. You're about to find out how reasonable they feel when you're broke." The next few weeks were a blur of legal carnage. Jason was demoted at work, a restructuring Brian Thompson had personally overseen. His salary was slashed. He was forced into a tiny one-bedroom apartment. But the real victory wasn't the revenge. It was the transformation. I watched Stephanie stop being a victim. I watched her enroll in a financial management course. I watched her reclaim her life. On a cold night in late February, after the divorce was finalized, we sat together in my study. I handed her a new folder. "What's this?" she asked. "The deed," I said. "I've transferred the house to you. It's under a trust that ensures you and the kids are safe for the next 10 years. No one can touch it, not even a future husband." She started to cry, but this time, it was quiet. "I don't deserve this, Dad. Not after I laughed." "You were under a spell," I said, taking her hand. "Desire whispers louder than guilt, and you wanted to believe he was the man he said he was. But now you know. A house is only as strong as its foundation, and our foundation is respect." I spent the spring restoring my '57 Chevy Bel Air. There's something about the hum of a perfectly tuned engine that settles the soul. I'm planning a road trip now, out past the limits of Austin, into the open desert. The kids are happy. Stephanie is working as an office manager, earning her own way for the first time in a decade. And Jason? I heard he filed for bankruptcy last week. He's discovering that when you build a life on someone else's hard work, it only takes one old man to pull the rug out. I sat on my patio tonight watching the fireflies. I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I realized then that I hadn't just saved my house, I'd saved my daughter's future. If you've ever felt invisible or disrespected by the people you love most, remember, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a plan coming together. Would you like me to tell you more stories of justice and redemption? Subscribe to our new channel. The link is in the description and the first comment. Don't lose us, because truth has a way of coming out when you least expect it. I raised my glass of bourbon to the dark Texas sky, to strategy, to family, and to the patient destruction of arrogant men.